Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're actually diving into Chapter 1, unlocking a world that's kind of hiding in plain sight. I'm talking about the world of massively large numbers. You know, we toss around words like millions, billions, and crores all the time, usually when we're chatting about money, populations, or maybe the stars in the sky. But honestly, how often do we stop and actually think about their sheer scale? Like, what do they really look like? And better yet, how can we work with them without our brains totally short-circuiting? Let's bring these giant, abstract concepts right down to earth.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. First, discovering large numbers. Then, comparing naming systems. Checking out some multiplication shortcuts and patterns. And finally, the art of rounding.
Section 1. Discovering large numbers. It is incredibly easy for huge numbers to just feel like, well, a meaningless string of zeros. To really get a grip on them, we need to anchor that abstract math to something real. So try this. If you tasted a brand new variety of rice every single day, could you taste 1 lakh, that's 100,000, varieties in a 100-year lifetime? It sounds like forever, right? A whole century. But let's actually do the math together. 100 years at 365 days a year, well, that gives you 36,500 days. Even if we throw in leap years, you wouldn't even hit 37,000. You wouldn't even come close to tasting all 1 lakh varieties. It really shifts your perspective on how giant 100,000 actually is, doesn't it?
And you know, this isn't just some random hypothetical. This comes straight from our text, featuring a farmer named Eshwarappa from Chintamani in Karnataka. One day at his local market, he overhears this mind-blowing fact. He learns that, historically, our country actually used to have about a lakh, 100,000 indigenous varieties of rice. Farmers used to preserve all these incredible seeds, though, sadly, only a fraction are left today. But just think about that for a second. A lakh varieties of just one single crop.
So, Ishwarappa goes home and drops this staggering fact on his kids, Roxy and Astu. And their reaction? Absolutely priceless. Astu is completely floored, realizing he's only ever tasted maybe 3 varieties of rice in his entire life. That massive gap between his 3 little varieties and the 1 lakh that used to exist, that is the absolute perfect way to realize just how huge the numbers sharing our world really are.
Section 2. Naming systems compared.
All right, now that we've felt the weight of these numbers, let's take a step up. We need to know how to actually name and write these beasts. This comparison perfectly shows the difference between the Indian place value system and the international system. The entire secret to translating between them, it literally just comes down to counting zeros. See, a 1 followed by 5 zeros is 1 lakh in the Indian system, which is exactly the same as 100,000 internationally. Pop another 0 on there, making it 6 zeros, and you've got 10 lakhs, or what the rest of the world calls 1 million. Jump all the way down to 9 zeros, and you hit 1 Arab in the Indian system. Internationally, that's the famous 1 billion mark. Putting them side by side like this totally clears up the confusion you get when watching global financial news, right?
Let's zoom in on the crore for a second. 1 crore is a 1 followed by exactly 7 zeros. Visually, if you look at the Indian system, pay attention to those commas. You place 1 after the first 3 digits from the right, and then every 2 digits after that. That simple visual grouping helps us instantly read it as 100 lakhs. Just imagine sitting there pressing a plus 100,000 button 10 times in a calculator, and then having to do that whole process 10 times over. It's massive.
So let's take these big numbers out into the real world. Check out this 2011 population data for some major Indian cities. Mumbai isn't just crowded. Numerically, it was sitting at 12 crore 42 lakhs 37,373 people. That's over 1.24 crore. New Delhi was right there at 1.10 crore, and Bangalore, even though it was a bit smaller back then, was still a massive 84 lakhs. When you're looking at these digits, remember they aren't just ink on a page. Every single unit represents a human life, a family, a story. Honestly, that's the true power of understanding scale.
Section 3. Multiplication shortcuts and patterns.
Okay, so we know what to call them, but let's shift gears. Let's do some math. Working with big numbers can be a real headache, but Roxy and S2 actually found some absolute magic in the textbook. Let's start with Roxy's trick. She needed to multiply 116 by 5. Now you could grab a pen and do long multiplication, or you could use our shortcut. Multiplying by 5 is the exact same thing as multiplying by 10 and then just dividing by 2. And multiplying by 10? That's effortless. You literally just add a 0. So 116 becomes 1,160.
Then just chop it in half. Half of 1100 is 550, half of 60 is 30, so boom, 580. You can do that in your head in seconds.
Then East2 takes this exact same logic but pushes it to the next level with the number 25. He's got 824 times 25. Again, the traditional way takes way too long. But East2 realizes, wait, multiplying by 25 is exactly the same as multiplying by 100 and then dividing by 4. So 824 instantly becomes 82,400. And dividing by 4 here is super easy. 824 divided by 4 is 206, so your answer is just 20,600. Look at that. Changing the approach makes the math instantly easier and, honestly, a lot more fun.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the hidden architecture behind multiplication. Whenever you multiply numbers, the length of your answer, the product, follows this totally predictable pattern. A 2-digit number times a 2-digit number will always, and I mean always, give you a 3- or 4-digit answer. Never 2, never 5. A 3-digit times a 3-digit? Always a 5- or 6-digit answer. Why does this matter? Because it's literally a built-in error checker. If you multiply two huge 3-digit numbers and end up with a 4-digit answer, you don't even need to recheck your math. You already know you made a mistake because the pattern tells you immediately. It's a total lifesaver.
Section 4. The Art of Rounding. Let's take a breath and slow things down a bit. We've been doing exact math, but out in the real world, we don't always need to be precise down to the very last decimal. Knowing when to use exact numbers and when it's okay to estimate is the real sign of number fluency. Our text makes a brilliant point. Math isn't just about rigid rules. It's all about context. Think about these everyday scenarios. If you're buying food for a group, you always round up. I mean, you never want someone to go hungry because you ordered exactly 2.1 slices of pizza per person, right? On the flip side, if you're estimating the time you have left to catch a bus, you round down. If you think you have 12 minutes, assume you have 10, just so you don't miss it. For distances between far-off cities, rounding either way is fine. Saying a place is 400 or 410 kilometers away doesn't really change your drive. But when you're handling money at a bank, no rounding allowed, exact numbers only. See, math is really about making smart choices for whatever situation you find yourself in. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've traveled from thousands of rice varieties to megacity populations, powered through some awesome math shortcuts, and wrapped up with the daily logic of estimating. So I want to leave you with this. What is the absolute largest number you interact with on a daily basis? Is it the byte count on your phone's storage, the views on a viral video, or maybe just the steps your smartwatch tracks over a whole year? Start looking for the lakhs and millions hiding in your own life. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.